What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle was wrong? What if the public image of warmth, empathy, and kindness was only one side of the story, carefully curated for cameras, interviews, and photo ops? The version the world loves to believe might be just that, a version. And according to someone who spent years in her household, someone who saw every smile, every quiet command, every private meltdown, the truth could shock you. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This is not gossip. This is an account from a former maid, someone who lived in the house, cooked the meals, cleaned the rooms, and observed the small, almost invisible behaviors that reveal a person's real character. And in this account, Meghan Markle wasn't always the compassionate figure admired by millions. She was human. But human in ways that were sometimes difficult, even terrifying, for those around her. When the maid first walked through the doors of Meghan's home, she thought she'd landed the job of a lifetime. To work in a royal-adjacent household, to be close to someone admired worldwide, was a chance few could even imagine. The first impression was almost magical. Meghan smiled. She was charming, she seemed genuinely kind, and the house radiated elegance. But as the days turned into weeks, subtle things started to shift. Instructions would change without notice. Rules appeared to have no consistency. Moments of warmth were immediately followed by moods that seemed almost unprovoked. The maid began to notice patterns, small yet persistent, that suggested an undercurrent of control and unpredictability. Have you ever worked for someone whose expectations were impossible to meet, whose approval was fleeting, whose temper was disguised behind polite words? Imagine that multiplied by 1,000, because in a household like this, nothing remained private, and every error felt amplified. The maid recalls feeling both awed and anxious, caught in the strange tension of admiration and fear. At first, she brushed off her discomfort. Perhaps it was just stress. Perhaps it was the nature of the job. But soon, she realized that this was not normal workplace tension. This was something different, something designed to keep her and the other staff in a constant state of alertness, always second-guessing themselves. There were moments that the public would never know, moments when Meghan allegedly wielded her charm like a weapon. A smile that seemed genuine in the daylight could transform into subtle coercion behind closed doors. Compliments were followed by impossible tasks. Praise was given and then withdrawn for reasons that no one could explain. Imagine being told you're doing a good job, only to find yourself punished minutes later for the very thing that was praised. And when you try to ask questions, confusion, denial, or sharp dismissal. The maid recalls a time when a simple request for clarification turned into a silent punishment. Cold shoulders, sudden changes to her duties, whispers that she couldn't fully interpret but felt in every nerve. This isn't just about strict household management. This is about power dynamics and human behavior at their most intense. It's about the subtle ways someone can control, intimidate, or manipulate without ever raising their voice. Gaslighting, emotional volatility, and silent punishments were reportedly part of the daily rhythm in the house. Staff learned quickly that survival didn't come from arguing, questioning, or even trying to anticipate the rules. It came from careful observation, silence, and sometimes a kind of fearful obedience. And yet, there were contradictions everywhere. In public, Meghan appeared the champion of kindness, a feminist icon, someone who spoke about empowerment, empathy, and generosity. She visited charities, supported causes, and smiled for the cameras. Yet the maid's account suggests that behind closed doors, a different narrative played out. A narrative that few would ever witness, a narrative that involved mood swings, secretive instructions, and an intensity that left staff feeling perpetually off balance. Why should this matter to us now, years later? Because the gap between public perception and private reality is a story we all should care about. Celebrity culture thrives on carefully curated images. The media amplifies the message, while the people who experience the day-to-day reality remain silent, fearful of reprisal, contracts, and lawsuits. But when one of them finally speaks, when the veil is lifted even just a little, it forces us to question what we accept as truth. It forces us to wonder what is hidden behind the polished headlines, the staged photos, the speeches, and the charitable appearances. The maid's revelations are not intended to malign for the sake of gossip. They are meant to shine a light on behaviors and patterns, to show the dissonance between the public narrative and private experience. She does not claim that Meghan is evil. She does not claim that she has a vendetta. What she claims is that the woman the world loves, the woman who inspires millions, is also human in ways that are messy, complicated, and, at times, alarming to those closest to her. It started with small, almost innocuous things. A look that froze the staff in place. A request that seemed impossible. Rules that shifted without explanation. Instructions that came in hushed whispers late at night. And then came the moments the maid calls the turning points. The nights she was woken at 3 a.m. for trivial reasons. The days when orders were denied after being clearly given. The punishments that seemed disproportionate to any perceived misstep. The maid observed it all. She watched the smiles fade when the cameras turned off. She felt the tension when someone was summoned without warning. She witnessed the private disappointment, the subtle manipulations, the microaggressions that piled up into a climate of fear. And the most striking thing, she says, is that these behaviors were sometimes masked with warmth, sometimes justified with logic, sometimes dismissed entirely when confronted. It was a cycle of charm, control, confusion, and compliance, repeated again and again. Now she is speaking out. Not for fame, not for attention, not for money, but because years later, she realizes that silence only protected the powerful. And the story she tells is filled with contradictions. A woman of public empathy and private ruthlessness, of advocacy and alleged intimidation, of charm and control. It is a story that forces a question every audience member must answer. How well do we really know the people we admire? And how many stories remain untold because those who lived them were too afraid to speak? The maid's accounts also reveal the emotional toll of working in such an environment. Sleep deprivation, stress, anxiety, and constant second-guessing were the norm. There were moments when she considered quitting outright but feared the consequences, legal, reputational, or even personal. She recounts the difficult balance between loyalty and self-preservation, admiration and fear. And in these accounts, we start to see a different side of the public figure we think we know, a side that is human but also profoundly complex. And while the public saw speeches about kindness and empowerment, the staff saw a different set of behaviors. Sometimes silent, sometimes explosive, often unpredictable. The maid recalls instances where she questioned her own memory, her own judgment, her own sanity. Because the environment was so meticulously controlled, so psychologically intricate, that even small missteps could feel catastrophic. But what makes this story truly compelling is not just the alleged behavior itself. It's the human reaction to it, the way ordinary people navigate extraordinary pressures, the way small acts of manipulation can ripple outward, the way private chaos can coexist with public perfection. It is the paradox that makes these revelations gripping, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. And now, years later, she has decided to tell her story. She wants the world to understand what it was like behind the doors that millions of fans only ever glimpsed through photographs or fleeting video clips. She wants the truth to exist somewhere between the headlines and the whispers. And she is ready to reveal moments that will shock, unsettle, and force you to reconsider everything you thought you knew. Because according to her, the first red flag appeared before Meghan even became royal. A small incident, almost trivial at the time, that set the tone for years to come. A night when instructions were unclear, voices were sharp, and the air itself seemed to thrum with tension. A night that would mark the beginning of a story few dared to tell. So buckle up. Prepare yourself for an account of charm, control, contradiction, and courage. Prepare to see a side of Meghan Markle that the cameras never capture, a side that is intimate, revealing, and deeply human. And as we begin, remember this. Sometimes the world applauds a persona, while the truth waits silently in the wings, invisible but undeniable. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever walked into a place thinking your life was about to change forever, only to realize that change comes with a price you didn't see coming? That's exactly how the maid felt the first day she stepped into Meghan Markle's home. At first glance, it looked like a dream. The house sparkled with a perfection that seemed almost unreal. The floors gleamed, the kitchen smelled faintly of fresh flowers, and there was an energy that suggested both elegance and warmth. It felt like stepping into a world only seen in magazines or Instagram posts. And for someone who had worked in ordinary households, someone used to long hours and little recognition, this was almost intoxicating. The first encounter with Meghan was disarming. She smiled with the kind of ease that could convince anyone she was approachable. Her voice was calm, her gestures measured. She asked polite questions about the maid's past experience, complimented her credentials, and made her feel instantly welcome. At that moment, the maid thought she had hit the jackpot. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to be part of something larger than herself, a chance to work closely with someone admired globally, someone who seemed poised, confident, and capable. But charm can be a double-edged sword. The maid soon noticed subtle details that didn't fit the initial impression. Instructions came in layers, sometimes contradictory. One day she was told to clean in a particular way, and the next, she would be chastised for following those exact instructions. At first, she thought it was a misunderstanding. Perhaps she had misheard, misread, or misinterpreted. But the confusion kept building. Little moments, the flicker of an eyebrow, the pause before an answer, the sigh that seemed small but carried weight, hinted at a pattern she couldn't yet name. It didn't take long for the maid to realize that in this house, perception was everything. Every word she said, every move she made, could be scrutinized in ways she hadn't experienced before. The cameras weren't the problem. It was the invisible scrutiny that came with proximity. Meghan's gaze could communicate approval or disapproval faster than words could. A compliment could instantly become a warning. A smile could signal charm or manipulation. The lines between kindness and control were blurred, and the maid began to feel that she was navigating a psychological maze with invisible walls. The first week was a balancing act. She learned quickly which doors she could enter and which required a knock, which tones of voice were safe, which questions were dangerous. Even small gestures mattered. Folding towels a certain way, aligning silverware perfectly, placing flowers just so. These seemingly minor details were part of an unspoken expectation that the maid didn't fully understand at first. Have you ever been in a job where one wrong move could ruin everything? Multiply that by 1,000, and you start to understand the pressure the maid felt. And yet, there was a strange allure in the chaos. Meghan's charisma was undeniable. She could make you feel like you were part of something special even as she reminded you, subtly, that your place was always a step below. The contradictions were intoxicating. Admiration and fear, hope and dread, opportunity and threat, all woven together in the rhythm of daily life. Early incidents were almost easy to dismiss. A late-night request to prepare a snack that wasn't on the schedule, a sudden shift in dinner plans, a whispered correction that seemed minor but left the maid questioning herself for hours. She told herself that she was sensitive, that she was overreacting, that it was simply the intensity of the job. But the pattern persisted, and patterns, as we all know, have a way of revealing the truth over time. By the second week, the maid started noticing what she later described as microtensions. Meghan's moods could shift in an instant, without warning or explanation. One moment, she would laugh easily, complimenting the maid on her work. The next, she would frown, asking why something wasn't done perfectly, as if perfection was a moving target. There were no explicit threats, no raised voices, no shouting. Instead, there were subtle corrections, silences that lingered, and that ineffable tension that fills a room like static electricity. The maid began to realize that charm, in this house, was a tool. It was used to disarm, to confuse, to control. Compliments were often followed by impossible demands. Praise was extended for things that were later criticized. Staff learned to anticipate moods, to read pauses, to interpret inflection.